Excellent.
Okay. Well, we will officially welcome y'all to our monthly webinar. We're really glad to have everyone. We are diving into a topic that's it's deep and also incredibly important. I think it's one that many people feel, even if they don't necessarily have language for it. And so, as you can see from the slide, tonight's workshop is entitled "The Shame Beneath the Grief: How Unresolved Pain Becomes Self-Blame and What It Takes to Finally Heal." So we're going to explore what Vicki and I think are one of the more overlooked emotional realities in personal growth, counseling, healing, recovery. And that's really the relationship between unresolved grief and shame. I think some people believe their problem is anxiety. Others think it's anger. Some people think it's addiction. Others think they lack confidence. Some people engage in self sabotage or are prone to depression, burnout, relational dysfunction. And sometimes that is exactly what the problem is. But underneath many of those struggles are two hidden forces that work together, and that's unresolved grief and shame. So we're going to kind of explore how that fits. Grief is painful. Shame is paralyzing. And when we don't process our grief in a healthy way, shame often moves in to interpret the pain through a false lens. So I just want to take a moment before we really get full more into this to just honor you for being here. Conversations about grief, loss, and transition, not easy conversations. And it takes a lot of courage to be willing to just face it and go to the deeper places in your heart to think about it and talk about it. So, this workshop is part teaching, it's part reflection. I strongly encourage you to take notes, but most of all, I just encourage you to be willing to be honest with yourself tonight. So here's a few things we want to highlight to help you get the most out of our time together. Looks like everybody has already got their screens on, which is awesome. We love to connect with you. We would love to know where you're tuning in from. So if you want to share with us in the chat where you're zooming from. The webinar is going to be about 60 minutes. The last 15 minutes or so, we will leave aside for questions. We love questions, so please do not be like, oh, I don't. If you have a question, please ask it. We love those questions. So the last thing is, feel free to interact with us in the chat. If you do have any questions, put those in the chat as well, and we will then, or Vicki, I should say, will look at all those and we will address them in the end, our Q&A. So thank you again for being here and welcome.
That is great. We have a lot of people from all over. Hi, Kimberly. I didn't see you on until I just saw you're in North Carolina. Calling in from there, from Canada, from Indiana. I know there's from Texas people here, like us, like we are. So we always like to share why we're here. This is our why, before we get into the content and why these conversations matter to us. Because we're not just here because we've studied this work or because we've coached people through it. We are here because we live the effects of unresolved grief and shame in very real ways in our own lives, in our own marriage. And we have had so much healing through the grief recovery method. It has helped our communication, and we've realized this in the ways that we learn to protect ourselves, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. So, both of us, both Dan and I, know what it's like to carry pain that we don't fully know how to process. And when grief goes unresolved, shame often begins to quietly form around it, and it's intense. So shame almost never announces itself. Instead, it sounds a lot more like this, like these kinds of things. I'm too much. I'm not enough. I'm just going to disappoint them. If I say what I really feel, I'll be rejected. If they're upset, it must be my fault. These are those kinds of things that we say, and that's shame. And when those beliefs are living under the surface, they affect everything. They affect how we connect, how we communicate, how we hear each other, and how safe we feel in our relationships with others. And that's why we can have normal conversations on the outside, but inside, shame can be interpreting everything through a lens of fear. And that is a tone of voice, even that can become rejection. Sometimes someone asks a question and it can feel like criticism. Silence can become abandonment, and a disagreement can become proof that something is wrong with me. Very powerful. So before we even realize what's happening, that we're not responding from love or truth, we are reacting from protection. I love this slide to kind of show how that works. This has been one of the most important things that we've learned in our own healing because so much of what looks like conflict is actually protection. So much of what feels like disconnection is actually unresolved pain, trying not to be hurt again. And the hard part is those patterns often served a purpose at one time. They helped us survive something. They helped us to keep going and they helped us to avoid pain that we did not yet know how to face. But what helps us survive can eventually begin to keep us from being fully known, even in a intimate relationship. So that's why grief recovery has been such a powerful experience for us because it didn't just help us understand our patterns, which it did, and that was big, but it has given us a way to complete what was emotionally unfinished underneath those patterns, because that's really the only way to change them. So when you're no longer living from shame, you begin to communicate from truth. And when you're no longer protecting yourself from pain that has already happened, you begin to experience connection in a new way. And ultimately, that's why we're here, because so many people are carrying shame that was never theirs to carry and grief that really just never had a safe place to be completed. And we talk about that a lot, completion. So, over the course of this webinar, we are going to help you understand how that happens, how that can affect your life, and what healing can look like. So, we're going to start by defining unresolved grief and shame.
Yeah, when many people hear the word grief, right, they immediately think of death and divorce. And of course, these are two very painful losses that we experience. But it's important to remember that grief is much broader than that. And so that means grief can happen anytime that life no longer looks the way that we thought it would, or when something changes, ends, breaks, disappears, or never becomes what we really hoped it would be. And one of the reasons so many people don't realize they're grieving is because there wasn't a funeral. There wasn't a clear moment when everyone gathered around them and said, "This matters. This is a loss. You are allowed to grieve this," right? And so we grieve things like we mentioned a moment ago, like the death of someone we love, or the divorce or end of a relationship. But there's also betrayal, broken trust, loss of health or ability, infertility or the family we hope to have, career loss, financial collapse, or a dream that fell apart, childhood neglect, abuse, or not being protected, the parent we needed but didn't have, the marriage we thought we were building until we weren't, the version of ourselves we lost along the way, all the innocence, time, safety, or identity that we just can't get back. And here's where this connects so deeply to shame, because when grief goes unnamed, it is almost always misinterpreted. So instead of saying, "I lost something that mattered," we begin to wonder, what's wrong with me? Instead of just simply recognizing that hurt me, we begin to believe I must be weak. And ultimately, instead of grieving what was missing, we blame ourselves for needing it in the first place. And
Mm.
so many of us are carrying grief that we've never been given language for. We only know, all we know, we feel tired. We feel reactive, numb, anxious, disconnected, restless, easily triggered. Like we're always bracing for, like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, but all the time, right? And compounding all of this is that underneath those symptoms is a heart desperately trying to interpret losses it was never given permission to grieve. But once we name it as grief, we can stop treating it like it's a character flaw. And that's really where healing begins.
Yeah, so let's look at shame. What is shame? Shame is very different than guilt. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, there's something wrong with me. And that distinction literally changes everything because guilt can lead to repair. When you recognize that you have a responsibility in something, you can repair that. You can begin to do that. But shame attacks our identity. Shame says, I am too much and I'm not enough, like we were talking about before. I am broken. I ruin things. If people knew me, they would reject me. That kind of thinking. But shame is really just pain that's turned inward.
Yeah. And this is where a lot of lives get stuck, right? A painful event happens. A child is neglected, a spouse leaves, a parent dies, a betrayal occurs, a dream collapses. There's an event. But then in the aftermath of these events, a person experiences the natural and normal feelings of grief that follow. But instead of being equipped with the tools to process that grief in a healthy way, they're usually just left alone with the pain. And the human mind hates unexplained pain, hates it. In fact, we hate it so much that we will even create a false meaning for it. So, in other words, instead of this hurt me, it becomes there must be something wrong with me. Instead of I was wounded, it becomes I am defective. Instead of I lost something valuable, it becomes I am not valuable. And just like that, grief becomes shame.
Yeah. And so we think, where did this start? How do we learn this? How do we learn this behavior, this kind of like pattern? And I've heard it said that children will often sacrifice authenticity, being honest, right, in order to preserve attachment. And so what does that look like? If a child is mistreated, neglected, or criticized, if they're not seen in their home, right? The child doesn't conclude, well, my caregivers are not really able to love well, because a child can't do that. The truth is too threatening, honestly. And instead, the child will conclude it must be me. And it starts young. It starts that young. And unfortunately, although that protects attachment in the short term, it actually creates shame in the long term. And the shame eventually becomes their adult identity. And that shows up as people pleasing, perfectionism, addiction, hyperachievement, like having to go, go, go all the time, like an inability to rest. It can be a real strong fear of rejection, can be chronic anxiety, and even just numbness. And it can't be emphasized enough that these are almost always adaptations to pain and not evidence of defectiveness in any way.
Yeah.
So this is so intense because the path to healing begins with identity. That's because shame always wants to attack who you are. So, for example, if there is a loss of a marriage through maybe divorce or something like that, it could feel like the messaging is I'm unlovable. Maybe the loss of a career, I am a failure. The loss of a parental approval can become I don't matter. I don't have value. And a lot of times, childhood abuse becomes I am bad. I am the problem. And the real problem is a distorted identity. And that's why we cannot heal by changing our behavior. Because even if we adjust our habits or manage our symptoms and even perform better for a while, if we still believe these lies about who we are, then those lies will eventually reclaim the ground. And we can't build long-lasting freedom on a false foundation because no one can live above the level of their deepest self-belief, what you believe.
Yeah. And most of us, I mean, obviously, we did not invent our shame, right? But we inherited it. Now, Some families teach shame directly. They will teach it directly to their kids. They'll say things like, "What is wrong with you?" Or "Stop crying," or "You're embarrassing us. Be strong. Don't talk about that. We don't discuss family problems." Other families teach shame indirectly through things like emotional absence, addiction, rage, abuse, secrecy,
Mm,
perfectionism, conditional love, or just never allowing room for honest emotions. And when you are growing up in an environment like that, you may become an adult who can function pretty well on the outside, but on the inside, you still feel like you're collapsing. So you can learn how to perform or how to keep the peace, read a room, overachieve, stay quiet, stay busy. Basically, you can learn to become whatever version of yourself feels the safest. But underneath all of that, there's grief. Maybe it's grief for the father you wanted or the mother you needed. um, Grief for the safety that you deserved or for a childhood you didn't get to fully experience.
mm.
Because here's what's important in all this: just because your grief didn't come with a funeral doesn't mean it wasn't real. Doesn't mean it wasn't real. Sometimes the shame that we carry is actually grief that never just had a safe place to be named. And so there it is. So let me just ask you, just and again, this is not to respond, but just to think about this and just take a second to think about it. Do you see yourself in any of these patterns? And again, please do not judge yourself here. Just look. Do you see yourself in any of these patterns? Do you see yourself as maybe something that your heart may be ready to heal, or at least wants to heal? Just think about that for a sec. Most of our fears are not random. They're actually shame moving through our nervous system, right? We have a lot of different fears. We have fears of rejection, or fears of conflict, or vulnerability, or fear of being seen, fear of failure, fear of intimacy. And why do we have these fears? Because shame is basically whispering in our ear, if the real you is exposed, you're going to lose love. So we hide, or we perform, or we control, or we overproduce, or we stay busy, or we numb out. We have all kinds of coping mechanisms. But underneath all of these fears, more often than not, is grief. And more specifically, the grief of not feeling safe enough to be truly known. You always had to put a version of yourself out there, but never the real you, because you were so trapped by these fears. And it's a very difficult place to navigate.
Yeah. So coping strategies hide both grief and shame. And when grief and shame are unresolved, we create survival strategies to remain functional. And these strategies can include things, if you've gone through grief recovery, you've heard us talk about STIRBs, right? They're short-term energy relieving behaviors. And those can be things like addiction, drinking, food, all those things, pornography, shopping, workaholism, social media dependence, overeating, emotional withdrawal, even controlling others, sleeping, rescuing others, endless busyness. All of these things are ways that we can distract ourselves. And not saying that they're bad in and of themselves. Some are probably not great things to do,
Yeah.
but a lot of it is how much, right? How much that we do. So, unfortunately, these behaviors are usually judged morally long before they're understood compassionately. And that does not cause, not, that's not, it doesn't excuse any harm that they can cause, but it does help in explaining the suffering. So that's why most people, and I just love this quote, they're not addicted to pleasure or numbing out, right? They're addicted to relief. That's what people are searching for, is a relief from what they're feeling. So unfortunately, that relief only lasts for a short time. That's why we call it short-term energy relieving behaviors, because the shame will return even louder. And the original grief is still there, but now there's a layer of shame on top of it. And that is a cycle. Pain creates shame. Shame seeks relief. Relief becomes a coping strategy, and that creates more shame. So the shame drives us back to needing relief, and it just becomes debilitating. And if you've ever been there, you know, and I've definitely been there. I can definitely relate. And it's not because you're broken, it's because you can get caught in a loop. And that loop is not, it's willpower is not enough. And it doesn't heal on its own. And that's why we have to go deeper than any kind of behavior management. So we want to compassionately ask, what pain is this behavior trying to soothe? So if you find yourself drawn into something that's going to make you kind of numb out and not feel, ask yourself that question. What pain am I trying to soothe? What grief is still asking to be heard? Because when that grief that's underneath it is processed, the shame loses its grip. I promise you. And the coping strategy no longer has to carry the weight of pain that it was never meant to heal. It doesn't have the capacity to heal.
Yeah. And I think, talking about shame, I mean, it's never going to be fun. It's just never want to be one of those topics that's fun to talk about. But I think what is especially hard about shame is that the deepest instinct embedded in the notion of shame is hide me, hide me. Shame is constantly telling us if they really knew this about me, they would leave. They would judge me. They would think less of me. So instead of reaching for connection, we withdraw and protect. We stay quiet. We minimize. We pretend we're fine. Everything's fine, even though it's not. And we keep silent about the pain and just try to manage it all on our own. And grief often gets hidden in there as well, because although shame survives in secrecy, grief survives in avoidance. And both of them together grow stronger in silence.
Wow, that one's worth repeating right there.
Yeah, yeah. Although shame survives in secrecy and grief survives in avoidance, both of them grow stronger in silence.
That's so good.
Yeah. And this is why safe relationships matter so much. It's because this process of healing really starts to begin when someone has enough safety to say the truth out loud. This happened to me. This hurt me. I miss what I never had. I blamed myself. I learned to hide. I'm exhausted from pretending. And something powerful happens when pain is no longer carried alone and when truth is spoken in emotional safety. Because all of this is what breaks the isolation keeping you trapped. And then when grief is finally given a voice, shame loses its hiding place. It's just gone. It's like the disinfectant of sunlight just beaming on it. And so something to kind of again think about, not don't get into like a shame thing, just an honest thing. Where have you learned to hide pain that might actually need compassion, truth, and completion? And again, just something to really think about and ponder. It's not, we're not looking for an answer here, but I think it's worth really considering.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've kind of looked at this and thought about these steps that really what healing looks like. And so healing usually does not happen with one big dramatic moment. Most of the time, it first begins with honesty, and it begins when we stop minimizing what happened. We stop explaining it away and blaming ourselves for it. And we simply tell the truth. That hurt me. That changed me. That cost me something. And I've been carrying more than I realized.
Mm.
But when unresolved grief and shame rather have been tangled together, healing includes these important steps. So number one is you need to name the losses. So for grief to be processed, it has to be named. And this is where we have to expand our understanding of loss. So the question is, who have you lost? Who has passed away? And the question is also, what did you lose? What did you lose in that? The relationship, what, like going deeper into that. What trust died in your life? What dream died? Maybe what innocence died? Sometimes we can lose a version of ourselves. Sometimes we lose versions of ourselves just because we get older and we have to deal with that. We're not in our 30s anymore. Dan and I went to a concert the other night and looked around. We were like, oh, wow, we are older. We are older. It was interesting. It was awesome. But what version of yourself did you lose? You might lose yourself in a bad or not healthy relationship. What years were taken or wasted or spent surviving? These are questions, they're difficult, but they're important. Maybe is there a relationship that you hoped would be different and never really became what you needed it to be? Sometimes people have that with a parent. And sometimes the most powerful grief work begins when we finally give language to the loss that no one else saw. Step two is you want to separate the grief from shame. And this is really an untangling. It's like untangling the lie. You experience loss, but it does not define your worth. You were wounded, but you are not worthless. And you might have been abandoned, but you are not disposable. And we are here to tell you that you are not the problem. Even if you have felt that way, even if shame has said to you ever that this happened because of who I am. And we are here to speak so passionately over you and to you that healing actually says this happened and it might have hurt you deeply, but it does not get to name you. Number three is to grieve what was real. Healing is most definitely not pretending that it didn't matter. It's allowing yourself to grieve that it did. And that might include tears, sadness, anger. We talk about grief is conflicting feelings that's caused by the end of a familiar pattern of behavior. So confusion can feel a lot. That's what grief feels like a lot. It's conflicting. It can be disappointed, and it can be even relief. Grief is not weakness and it is not self-pity. Grief is the honest emotional response to loss. And so often what has been trapped inside us does not need another explanation. It just needs expression. Step four is expose the lies. Shame grows in silence because it sounds like truth when it stays hidden. Isn't that so true? So part of healing is identifying the lies that shame has been telling you. Because once those lies are brought into the light, we can ask, where did I learn that? Who told me that? Step five is to receive the truth. Ask this question, is that actually true? Are those things that you came to believe about yourself actually true? Because we are here to say that they probably are not. Part of healing and exposing the lie and receiving the truth that shame tried to bury. Because these are the truths that we're speaking, is that you are not worthless or defective or weak or needy. You learned how to protect yourself. And the truth will probably feel unfamiliar at first, for sure. It will. It's sometimes you realize that it's hard to receive the truth when you're believing of a lie. You're more comfortable over there. And part of the healing means letting the truth become louder than the story that shame has been telling you. Number 6 is practice safe connection. Shame heals in the presence of safe connection, not in performance, not in fixing or advice or judgment, but in a safe connection. Because much of our pain happened in relationship, much of our healing also happens in relationship. And that might be scary. That might feel like, what? But sharing honestly with someone who can hold your story with compassion is key. It's absolutely key. And it might look like doing guided grief work. It might look like learning to communicate without hiding, blaming, or shutting down. And healing shame does not happen by forcing ourselves to be exposed everywhere, right? It happens by finding safe places and safe people so we can stop hiding. When grief is named, shame loosens its hold on our lives. And when it's expressed, the body no longer has to carry that pain in the way that it has. So it's amazing because when lies are exposed, the truth begins to take root. And that allows us to experience safe connection and really remember who we were before shame taught us to hide.
Yeah. I think many of us make the common mistake of thinking we just need more, right? More discipline, more willpower, more productivity, more relationships, a better management system. But what we actually need is more emotionally honest work. We need the courage to acknowledge what was lost, what was broken, what never happened, and what still hurts. We try to move forward while carrying grief and shame we have never fully processed, and it just doesn't work. So, in the process, we need self compassion, learning to meet our own wounds with kindness instead of contempt. Because self discipline may produce some temporary motivation, but it doesn't heal our hearts. We need truth telling, naming reality without distortion. What happened mattered. Whatever hurt us, hurt us. What shaped us, shaped us. And so healing really begins the moment that denial ends. And that's when a shift takes place. And that's why we need forgiveness. We're not excusing the harm. We're not pretending it didn't matter. We're simply releasing whatever hold that the past still has on our inner life. And so, what that looks like is sometimes we're forgiving others, and sometimes we're forgiving ourselves.
Mm.
But we need safety for our nervous system to function. Because what's happening is many of us are trying to heal while our body still feels very much under attack. And when our bodies are dysregulated, they have difficulty receiving peace, trusting, or even inviting connection. And so that's why safety is literally the soil where healing grows. Because as we are given support from wise, steady, compassionate relationships, that's where we're able to be ourselves, truly, truly ourselves. And so much of our pain, because it happened in relationship, much of our healing will also happen in relationship. Isolation only deepens our suffering. It only makes things worse. And so the healing of our shame, the rejection of the lies that tell us we're defective or that we're broken or we're too much or we're not enough or we're beyond repair, it all starts with our identity. And so it makes sense then that shame attacks our identity and convinces us that it's our wounds that define our worth. And that is a lie that must absolutely be exposed and replaced with the truth. Because at the end of the day, we don't need better strategies. We need to become more whole in ourselves.
Yes, and that's why the grief recovery method matters so much and why it's so powerful because it doesn't just teach people to cope better, it gives them the tools to go to the root. So many people spend years trying to manage symptoms of unresolved grief and shame, like we've talked about here, a lot of them, the anxiety, the overthinking, the anger, the numbness, and even the self-sabotage. But grief recovery really helps us take an honest look underneath those patterns and ask, what losses have I never fully grieved? And it's interesting when you do because you can actually start to connect like what pain turned into self-rejection. That's a big one. What
Mm,
family messages shaped shame for me? What coping habits are protecting unhealed pain? Another big one. That's another big one.
mm,
Where am I performing instead of living? And finally, think about this. What would it like to feel loved and be loved without pretending that everything's okay? And this work really helps us name the grief that has been hidden, untangle the shame that's formed around it, and begin completing what has been left emotionally unfinished. Because shame says a lot of the time there's something wrong with me, but grief recovery helps us see something happened to me, something hurt me, and something was lost. And in that, we can heal by grieving and expressing and completing. And really, that distinction changes everything. So, the tools of grief recovery help us identify our losses, tell our emotional truth, giving voice to what we never fully expressed. And then in doing those, we get to release the pain that we've been carrying. And when the grief underneath the shame heals, those patterns begin to soften. Our nervous system feels safer. I don't know about you, I feel it in my chest. Like it
mm.
affects my breathing, my breath literally gets short. And I can feel that and it's a tell for me, okay, I am holding on. I can lean in using my tools. And when we do, our nervous system will shift and feel safer. We can breathe deeper and our relationships shift because our communication becomes clearer. We have boundaries that are healthier. We don't feel bad about having boundaries, and we have the clarity to have them. That's the first step, right? And you really begin to experience freedom instead of survival. That's really truly a gift of this work. So we love this work because we believe so much that it doesn't just help people understand their pain, it helps them to experience emotional completion. And that is really why we call it an action program, because there will be a shift in the process. And we want you to become free from feeling trapped. So we don't want you to live any longer from a wound or a lie or a version of yourself that you became to survive. We had a great webinar last month on grieving the person I had to become in order to survive. Very powerful. It goes really well hand in hand with this. And it's possible. It truly is. And our goal is to live from a deeper place of truth and clarity and connection and freedom. So, one of the things that is true, the grief recovery method is the only evidence-based program that is designed to get you emotionally complete with any loss of any kind. Um, that is really a cool distinction that we have. And again, remember that we're never here to say we need to forget about it or get over it ever. You'll never hear those words come out. In fact, I hate to even say them as an example, but we really want you to experience real freedom. And so if tonight has stirred something in you, then we invite you to reach out, set up a call. We will have time at the end of this pretty soon here. We'd love to hear. We'd love to hear what's churning in for you and set up time to chat.
Yeah. So we have an 8 week one-on-one coaching experience. And what it's designed to do is really help you get to the root of unresolved grief and the shame that often forms around it. And we do this through weekly 90-minute Zoom sessions. We walk you step by step through the Grief Recovery Handbook and then guide you through a proven process to help identify the losses and the pain that you might still be carrying, and then to understand how unresolved grief can shape shame, self protection, and relationship patterns that we may be in. So, this is very deep and intentional work, and we're with you every step of the way throughout the entire process. I also want to mention just really quickly for the alumni who are on this call, welcome back. Continuing this work through alumni sessions is really, we believe, the best way to reach deeper levels of healing and clarity, something Vicki and I have both used quite a bit over the years. Um, but one of the things that I think is kind of important is if something has shifted in you from what has been shared tonight, then we would just love to invite you to a complimentary conversation. This is a no pressure space for you to just be heard, talk about whatever you're experiencing that maybe feels unfinished, and then just explore what support might look like for you. So before we show you how to book a call with us, we just want to make a kind of an important announcement. Some of you are here tonight because a grief recovery specialist that you know and trusted invited you. And so if that's you, we want to honor that relationship. So please reach back out to them. Let them know what moved you tonight. They would love to walk through this next step with you. And if you found your way here directly through us, then of course we would be honored to have that conversation with you ourselves.
Yes. So we want to break down everything that you get from this process and this program. We always want to offer a free call, a free consultation call, which with either Dan or myself. And what we talk about is exactly where you are. We want to hear your story. We want to hear what is presenting for you. And then we will share with you how the process works. And we know that the grief recovery method is backed by more than 40 years of research. The program is considered the gold standard in recovery from grief and loss. We meet for 8 weeks of 90 minutes. So it's an hour and a half of one-on-one coaching calls with ongoing support. And all of this is valued at $1,200. It breaks down to weekly. That's over the 8 weeks. And we want to give you something special to thank you for being with us on today's webinar.
Yes. So for anyone that's ready to take the next step right now, we're inviting you to book a free consultation call with either Vicki or myself, and we will take $100 off of the 8-week grief recovery program. So like Vicki mentioned, during our consultation call, we'll explore whatever way we can support you, answer your questions, and if you're ready, we'll create a personalized roadmap for your journey. Also, if you're an alumni, we also encourage you to book a consultation call with us, as there's a lot more healing and growth waiting for you there as well.
Yes. So we want to end here. And I loved this photo. I feel like when I first saw it, it reminded me of kind of like the healing work that comes with inner child and really giving voice. A lot of it times it's to you as a child, the things that you get to work through. And we want to let you know that the shame that you've carried did not appear out of nowhere. It formed around pain that mattered, around losses that were never fully grieved, around moments when you felt hurt, unseen, rejected, abandoned, or left to make sense of what should never have happened alone. But shame is not your identity. It is the lie that formed around your grief. And when grief is finally given a voice, that shame will lose its power. And that's why we'd love to invite you to take that step to book a call with us. And we will also put Calendly links in the chat, which I should have done before we started, but I'll try to do that. You can also find our Calendly links. Actually, this will be easier at freedomfromgrief.com/contact us. I can put that on there. Actually, Monique, if you are here, you are my girl. If you can do that, that will take you straight to our page. And actually, both Dan and I have links on that page. So that would be fantastic. So you'll find, well, we will send those to you in an email that you will get tomorrow. You will have the replay for tonight's call, our everything to get a hold of us and anything that we can do to support you. We are in it. We are in it with you 100%.
Yeah. So before we close for tonight, I just want to again thank you for being with us, and just take some time for any questions that you have. Like I said, I wasn't kidding. We love questions. We will answer all the questions that you have. We will stay on until every question is answered. And again, your question may be about something we've shared. maybe how these ideas connected to something inside you, or how the process works, or whatever. I mean, it's we're here for literally any questions that you have. And honestly, there are no small or unimportant questions. If it's on your heart, it matters, and it's worth asking. If you don't want to necessarily, unmute yourself and ask the question in the group, you can always drop it in the chat, and we will repeat the question to the group so everybody can hear what the question is, and then we will be happy to answer it. So whatever you feel more comfortable doing, like I said, we will stay on as long as we need to make sure that every question is answered.
Yeah, and even if you don't have a question, even if there's something that hit you tonight, thank you, Monique. You're the best. Monique just put the link up there. If something hit you tonight or anything at all, you're welcome to.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Yes, please.
Or is it open to questions right now?
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
absolutely.
Okay. First off, thank you so much, Dan and Vicki. And this just sounds really exciting. And I think it's absolutely amazing that you guys are doing it at this season, at this time. While you guys were talking, I was thinking about people, oh my gosh, they would really benefit from this. They would really benefit from this. But um, I thought that I had walked through the majority of healing with my mom, but
Mhm.
something that came up about maybe a week or two ago. And my question is, I can there be layers of rejection?
Oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah. Oh
definitely. Yeah, definitely. And that's really why the alumni work is so powerful because I know you've graphed your mom. Um, and I know there's been time, between the time that you did that and now. And so doing alumni work is you can do PSs and you can do deeper work. And sometimes it isn't even just something that happened, it might even be deeper understanding. Like you said, like layers of rejection. Yes, there is a lot that we could do with alumni with that.
yeah, I think that happens for a lot of people. There's because again, our minds are very kind to us, and they will set boundaries sometimes even when we can't for ourselves. And so the mind will kind of interject itself and say, okay, we're not gonna get into that. That's too much. That's too much. Let's just hold right here. And so then when you've processed it and you can come out on the other side and then be ready for that, then there can become a deeper layer that you go into. And I think, that's with, in particular, a lot of times for people that aren't familiar, that we do like, there's like after you finish the process, you can do a PS letter, and then the PS letter is where, like in a normal correspondence, where you're adding on a communication that has arisen after you've finished the content of the letter. So yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great question, because that's you know um it's like, as much as I believe in the process, it isn't just like this magical, okay, after 8 weeks everything is fixed. There is a lot of growth, there is a lot of healing, but sometimes, especially with really deep things, um it will happen in layers.
Um,
So yeah.
yeah, I feel like the grief recovery method, I feel like it opens the door and it's almost like the foundation. I feel like it sets the foundation, and sometimes there's other little things that come along, like, oh, wait a minute, I want to deal with this too. So I
Mhm.
Yeah.
feel like it really opens the door for that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
for
that's a really good question.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about how grief is accumulative. So it kind of builds, till like I think John's story in the book is so profound to really illustrate that. He had so many losses in his life, major losses, losing his brother, went to Vietnam, had so much loss, and then lost his little boy when he was 3 days old. And there was this confusion because he was like, how am I not able to handle this? I have experienced so much loss. But realizing that all of those losses had built up to where there was very little capacity left. And I think that that happens too. It's like there are certain things that will reveal themselves when you're ready to deal with them or when you're in a place to do that. And sometimes it doesn't feel like you're like, wait, I don't think I'm really ready to deal with that, or it might not feel that way. But I would say that if it's presenting like that, that you are, yeah, and that the tools will work however deep that you need to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is accumulative. It's one of those things that we're not taught how to do. We're not taught, like John says, we're taught in life how to acquire things, but we're not taught what to do when we lose them.
Yeah.
The focus is a lot on that, and it's painful.
I guess I
And
got a question, kind of go with Letty, the same kind of thing where I'm not dealing with a loss of a person per se. It's more of my marriage. And I guess my question is once you start dealing with all these things, how do you get your point across? Because like I'm dealing with someone that doesn't want to deal with anything. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to make these changes, but it's hard for me when it's like the only person that's working is one-sided. So is there like levels like where, I mean, like that you can like I guess process it better or realize or just cough it up to just getting divorced? You know what I mean? I guess I'm at a kind of a loss.
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that obviously if you only have one person, like if you're rowing a boat and only one person is rowing, that boat's gonna go nowhere, So that's obviously a challenging thing to have to navigate. But I think one of the things that really makes GR powerful is that it doesn't really matter what the other person does or doesn't do because you're processing the relationship and your experience of that relationship. And so when you're doing that, you're able to show up differently in that relationship. And you're not needing them to validate or invalidate anything you're saying or feeling or, because again, it's like if things were up to other people for our healing,
Right.
I mean, we would probably never get any healing. Uh,
Right.
so it's kind of like you're touching on one of the things that really makes it powerful is that, yes, in a perfect world, it would be great if you had two people coming together and having, a dialogue and being able to, but that's not the reality that you're in right now. But you can do what you can for yourself, which is
Right.
awesome.
Nobody can change anything but myself.
Yeah. Yeah, which is encouraging.
Thank you.
yeah. And I think another
Definitely, I
powerful,
feel like that will bring a lot of clarity for you
hmm yeah,
and show you kind of, I feel like it really helps with the clarity and decision making, like all of those things.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yes, definitely.
yeah. And Letty, that's exactly what I was going to share was that on the other side is for you is clarity. Because when you get like all the stuff that we talked about tonight, the grief and the shame and all those layers, and as you are healing and the layers are kind of going away, what comes is clarity. So you and I were talking about this, I remember, but when we're in a relationship, especially if there's has been some unhealthy dynamics, there's like a dance that we do. And all of a sudden, you're not doing the dance. You're just kind of going like this, but this person is still kind of doing the dance, but because you're changing and you're showing up differently, it kind of forces the whole relationship to shift and the clarity will come. What the answer is, I don't know that, but the clarity is going to come to you. And what's so awesome is that clarity brings you the ability to have boundaries, not take things on that aren't yours, to not go into those shame places that can happen, especially you've been married a long time, and there's a lot of relational dynamics there. So it makes sense. But yeah, the clarity that comes from
And I've definitely gotten the clarity. Like it has helped me immensely. It's just frustrating because
yeah,
it's one sided, and
Yeah.
that's where it's becomes Like, and you're right, it's decision. It's whether I need to make that decision with a clear mind instead of it being all boggled up like I was before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Did anything tonight hit anybody? Was there any kind of like a clarity or something that you could connect to? You don't have to necessarily share what it was, or did anything make sense or make something make more sense?
I think for me, the shame part really hits a note for me, because before I was dealing with, you know, it, it, I always feel like it's me that's doing something wrong.
Hmm.
And, you know, and after a while, you know what I mean? Like you're told that, and then after a while, you start to believe it. So I think when you talk about shame and how it's just unresolved, you know what I mean? Where it's grief, it really is that piece of the puzzle. Because before it was just, well, I'm ashamed. I'm not going to tell anybody. I don't want to spread my business out. I don't, you know, I just need to, I was in the military and you need to suck, embrace the suck. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It'll get better.
Right? Yeah.
So it's was definitely with the shame part that really hit home for me.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Monique is she's our, I'm trying to read her, all the things she's putting in the comments here. Oh, yes. Thank you, Monique. Yes. Well, we are so happy that you guys all joined us tonight. I think we're coming up on time. We are. We want to definitely respect and honor that for you guys. We appreciate it. We would love to chat more. If anybody has any deeper questions or want to dig a little bit more on a personal note, we're always here to do that.
Yeah.
And thank you for being here. And I will stop the recording now. And we'll see y'all maybe next month on our next webinar. But thank you all for being here.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Thank you.